Hello, Trombone Internet. This is Chris Van Hoff, assistant to the regional manager of the International Trombone Festival. We at the festival, of course, are huge fans of the pod, and we are really excited to invite you to attend this year's 2024 International Trombone Festival at TCU in Fort Worth, Texas. Dave Begnosh is our host. We have the world premiere of a brand new double concerto for trombone and piano with the Fort Worth Symphony. We have the American Brass Quintet. We have late night jazz featuring a Latin jam session. Like, everything is happening. All the cast will be there. It's the best hang in the world, and we hope to see you there. You can register for the festival still online at www.internationaltrombonefestival.com, and it's happening the last week of May. So go register. We'll see you in Texas.
Welcome to the Trombone Retreat, a podcast of the Third Coast Trombone Retreat. Today on the podcast, we talk to Dr. Steve Wolfinbarger, professor of trombone at Western Michigan University. My name is Sebastian Vera, and I'm joined as always by Nick Schwartz. Nick, it's been a minute, but we're back, and some might say better than ever.
525,600 minutes. I don't know how that just popped in my head.
You can sing that song whenever you want. How do you measure
a year?
We should just open every podcast with musicals.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the people want, I'm sure.
We could get like real obscure, like 1920s musicals and stuff like that.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah.
Everything's Irish influence. So we haven't been here in a while, and we missed everybody, and you know, school's been starting. It's been kind of nuts, and I'm sure a lot of you can identify with that. I haven't ever officially said I'm starting as a faculty member at Duquesne University this year, along with my buddy Jim Nova and Jeff D, in addition to Slippery Rock. And you know, we're all just kind of adjusting and doing everything crazy online. And because of that, we wanted to talk to a professor.
Well, hold on. You just danced over it, just real quick.
What did I dance over?
Congratulations, Sebastian.
I was wondering why you're so quiet. You're looking up your favorite app. Well, I appreciate that. I'm really excited. And we're going to have our good friend Jim Nova on here sometime soon to talk a little bit more about that.
Spoiler alert.
Well, I mean, that was a given from the beginning.
Yeah, of course.
And we were kind of, you know, a lot of good friends in town, so we want to wait until everything's okay to be in person again, because those are some of the interviews we want to definitely try to do in person.
Right, yeah, there's so many people in Pittsburgh that we got to do, and in New York, and in both our towns, there's so many people we got to do.
And sometimes it'll be magical where all three of us can be in the room at the same time.
Absolutely, yep.
So yeah, we wanted to talk to a professor, and honestly, this is the first name that came to both of our minds. We have an immense amount of respect for him. Nick knows him pretty well and has visited his university, and he's just one of those guys that's been there, and he's just pumping out successful student after successful student. And we've had a chance to be around a lot of his students at the retreat, and we're always really impressed. Especially, you know, he's coming from. It's not like he's just shows up and he's teaching at a conservatory and he's having all the best students in the country audition each year. You know, he's at this school.
Yeah, and he mentioned it. He said at a school like Western, your recruitment area is basically 150 miles around the city of Kalamazoo. And to be able to procure the talent and pump out the students that he has, you know, he is definitely turning water into wine, so to speak. In some cases, he's just an excellent teacher. He's taking these young people and turning them into just excellent trombonists.
Yeah, and so he's won basically every award a teacher could win in the state of Michigan, and he's an ITA award winner. You know, you constantly see his students in the finals for these competitions, and you know. It was just a really good talk, and we just peppered him with a lot of pedagogical questions about building a studio and building a culture and recruiting and how to approach certain situations with students. And we just really, really enjoyed the talk. And he was the first person we ever emailed that wasn't instant, yes, I want to be on the podcast. Because, you know, he's kind of more of a private guy from what I gather. Mm-hmm. And you know, doesn't want a lot of attention, but he really was really genuine with us and opened up to us, and we really are excited for you guys to hear it.
Absolutely.
And if you haven't yet, wherever you're listening, please subscribe to the Trombone Retreat on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen, just so you get a nice little notification. So just give that subscribe button a little gentle tap.
A little howsy do's it, I think is what I call it.
Give it the business.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, without further ado, enjoy our talk with Dr. Steve Wolfinbarger.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, how are
Going?
you guys?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I'm okay. Doing well. Good.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And I'll tell you what, I have encouraged my students to attend the trombone retreat. You've had a couple of my students. And,
Absolutely.
they have,
Had a few.
yeah.
Let me think off top. If I can do off the top of my head, we had Evan Clifton,
Yep.
AJ Muse,
Right, Musey.
Musey. That's how you
Yep.
say his last name. I was just
Yeah,
He's
Musey.
gonna be
Yeah,
mad
sure.
at you for
he,
saying his name wrong.
I'm gonna say AJ Muse again, just to get an angry email from him.
He'll like it.
Yeah,
It's
I
because
probably
he's
will.
our muse. That's why we think of him.
That's it. And we had, who else did we have? We had
Omar.
Anibal. We had Omar Anibal. Well, we're obviously very appreciative of you sending people our way, and it's always a pleasure to have someone from Western because we know that they're coming from excellent tutelage under you.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, good kids. I'm very fortunate to have some really excellent students, and I think that's part of the process when students audition. I really look at not only the way they play, but I try to evaluate their grade point average and what kind of work ethic they have. How will they fit into the studio? To me, those things are all really important. I've been fortunate. I've just gotten some great kids, and I have great kids right now. Some really talented students.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah, they're doing fantastic.
So with school starting up again, and obviously this very unique time, we wanted to talk to someone that was a professor that we really respected. And, you know, this is the first time I've met you, and it's a pleasure. And when we thought of someone that we wanted to talk to, both of us thought of you first. Because for me personally, Nick knows you a lot better, but your students always strike me. When I hear them, there's just a certain level of musical maturity I hear with them at their age. And we have a bunch of pedagogy questions we want to pick your brain about. But before we get into that, we kind of want to just learn a little more about you. So are you from Missouri?
From Missouri, Springfield, Missouri. It's in the southwest corner of the state.
So is that Missouri or Missouri down there?
Depends where you're from. I think we call it Missouri. That's what I've always known it as, but I've heard it the other way too. But it's about 30 miles north of Branson, and people, of course, know
I love Branson.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful place. Large lakes and boating and lots of palaces and shopping and entertainment acts. It's a really great place. That's the area I grew up in. They've got some good kids there. I attended a high school that was probably around 1,500 students, had a good band program, Kickapoo High School. But before that, I actually started on trumpet. That was my first instrument. So
We'll forgive you.
Yeah, I know. Trumpet was my first instrument. I played that for 2 years, 5th and 6th grade. And then I was about to start junior high. And the band director says, we need a tubist. We need more tubas in the high school band. So would you consider switching to euphonium? Going to the dark side,
That's really, really.
The really dark side.
I don't know if we can forgive that, but we'll push on.
I switched to euphonium with the intent of eventually playing tuba. Interestingly enough, my dad wanted me to play trumpet at the beginning, but I wanted to play trombone. So I went ahead. That was his desire, and he was buying the instrument. So I went ahead and played trumpet and switched to euphonium. And then when I got in 8th grade, they said, we need trombones. So I switched to trombone. So my first year in high school was really the first time I had played trombone. And I picked it up pretty quickly. It was a good band program, as I said. I think the high school band probably had 11 or 12 trombones in it, and I made second chair my first year. So I had only played trombone that time for just a few months, but it's an easy transition, from euphonium to trombone, and it just worked out pretty easily for me.
Isn't it funny how we always remember how we did on like our first chair test?
Yeah.
It always sticks with you.
And I remember the band director. I think I was taking private lessons by my junior year. I kept my books in the band room. and I had my Tyrell, 40 Progressive Studies, and I remember the band director tearing a page out of my Tyrell for auditions. So it was number 23. I
So
still remember that. So
wow.
don't ask me why, but
Yeah.
sure, yeah, I remember those auditions. But that's a little bit about my background. Just my mom and dad had a little bit of music in their background. My dad played a little bit of piano. It was kind of more or less by ear. He sung in a gospel quartet.
Hmm.
And I remember vividly my dad walking around the house and sometimes listening to recordings and trying to find his part with the quartet. And that stuck with me because to this day, I listen to music and I'm always trying to find the bass line or find the certain parts. And I think it goes back partly to my dad when he was singing tenor or sometimes bass in this gospel quartet. And he would be hunting out the parts and trying to find his individual notes. So I really think that had some kind of an impact on me.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, like I know from my upbringing, it was that my dad constantly had music playing and just a general appreciation for music. So even though I didn't come from a musical family in the traditional sense, I mean, but there was such an appreciation for it. I do attribute my success to just having a general love of it.
Yeah.
And no matter how far that love goes into actually performing it yourself, I think that's one thing that binds maybe not musical families in the sense that they didn't make a living playing or performing music.
Right. The other thing that was kind of interesting about my early years, and I have no idea why, because at that point, I mean, it was early years of high school. I had no idea I was going to go into music at the time. But I remember my parents having a demo record, and there was this tune called That's a Plenty, which, was a standard. And I used to love listening to that. And at whatever point, I must have been about an 8th grade or maybe 9th grade, I sat down with the turntable, dropped the needle, and started writing out the parts. And I think it took me about a year, but it was a great exercise in ear training.
Wow,
I wrote out all the parts, and I've still got the music around here somewhere. But it was just kind of a neat thing that really helped me be able to hear intervals and hear lines. And it was, again, not something I really was intending to do to help my musical future. I just wanted to do it.
Wow, that if the writing wasn't on the wall at that point that you were going into music,
yeah, what a surprise!
Yeah,
And at the time, I had no idea. All the way up into college, I feel like I had a really good ear, and I look back at those developments in my early career, and I think they really played a part.
So where did you attend college then? What was your path to kind of from college to where we are today?
I studied my last 2 years with a gentleman named Joe Nicholson. Call him Dr. Joe. And Dr. Joe was the trombone teacher at Evangel University, church-related school. I remember studying from him for about 2 years. It was just meat and potatoes. He was teaching all the right stuff. It was standard, good, basic material. And my mom said, if you go there and keep studying from Dr. Joe, I'll pay for your education. And I said, sure. And I feel like I had a really great education there. So I did my undergraduate at Evangel University. And then a good friend of mine, a name you may or may not know, his name was Eric Swanson. Eric Swanson is a Dallas-Fort Worth professional. I think he plays may play in the Dallas or Fort Worth Opera. Eric is a bass trombonist, and he went to high school. We were at Kickapoo High School together. And Eric said, you should come down and check out North Texas. Now, I didn't know a lot about it at the time. I knew it was a fine school. So I decided to apply there for a master's. Back in those days, you could send in a recording. You didn't actually have to do a live audition. So I sent in a recording, and one day got a call from their trombone professor saying, we want to offer you an assistant. So
that was Vern, right?
Actually, before that was Leon Brown.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Leon Brown retired in 1982, and then Vern came on at that point.
So while you were there, Vern started.
Yeah, Leon, I was there from 1980 to 1981. It was a really strange situation because I only completed 1 year on my master's, and I found out about a job that was open at McNeese State University. But during that 1 year, I studied from Leon. And again, fantastic guy, fantastic teacher, never heard him play, never played a note. He was retired from trombone at that point and, older. He was older in his career. I studied from him for 1 year and applied for this job, even though I still had a year left on my math. So I was hired at McNeese State University. Interestingly enough, it's in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and we all know that city has been in the news lately because of the hurricane.
Yeah.
So I applied for the job and got the job without a master's degree. Taught at McNeese State for 6 years. So during the time I was at McNeese, I went back and took 1 year sabbatical to start working on my doctorate. And Vern was there at that time. That would have been in 1984. So that was really my first study with Vern.
So funny fact. I mean, you were close to being in Denton in 1983. That was kind of when you were gone. But I was actually born in Denton in 1983.
Unbelievable.
So,
Yeah, you're from Texas, aren't you?
Old, but yeah, I'm from that area. My mom actually is a adjunct professor there now at University of North Texas. And
oh my God!
Actually, I wanted to talk to you about Vern because I know in talking to some of your students, he played a huge role in your life, and you're really close to him. And I was fortunate to grab a couple lessons with him while I was in high school there. What was that experience like, especially at the beginning of his tenure there? And he was coming from Youngstown, right?
Youngstown State. Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
And I taught there a little while too.
Oh, you
so,
did?
So there's like all these random connections.
Well,
But
I'm fortunate to have one of my graduates teaching there now. That's Andy Mitchell.
Oh, great.
Great. Andy's awesome.
So what was the experience like with Vern? What did you take away most? What do you remember most about, the impact he had on you?
Fantastic teacher. And like a lot of my other teachers, Joe Nicholson, Leon Brown, and Vern Cagrice, they hardly ever played. Vern did play some. I think I heard him play a recital once, maybe twice at the most. But in lessons, he hardly played. So I kind of had that role model pattern going on. But number one, he had a way of saying things in lessons. Just it would kind of like, wow, I've never thought of it like that. Just kind of an interesting approach. He was also very active in the International Trombone Association, of course. And to this day, I appreciate what he's done for me because he got me actively involved in it too. But those were two things about Vern. It was just, and he was highly dedicated to his students. You felt like you could call him anytime, day or night. You could go over to his house. These are all characteristics of Vern. And it's funny how, we as teachers, it's kind of like we take a little bit of Joe Nicholson and a little bit of Leon Brown and a little bit of Vern Cagrice, and we put those things all together, and that's who we become as teachers. And I look back and I see what I took from each of those, and that's really who I am.
It's so funny you bring this up. I just taught a class at Manus today, a brass performance class, and we're doing an exercise where students will play. I'll give a little bit of input and then have an assigned student teach the other student to try to give them a first taste and experience of teaching, and then critique the teaching styles of like, okay, you said this, maybe you could say this might be more effective. And I said today, we're if you think about it, we're just an amalgamation of everyone who's taught us. And so it's just, to me, when you were saying that, I was just smiling, thinking, that's exactly how I feel about it. Like, I am the product of the people who taught me.
Yeah. And of course, the other thing that really greatly influenced my teaching was attending trombone events. I've attended so many international trombone workshops, and I'm embarrassed to say I've spent most of the time talking to people rather than actually attending. But there's so many great people you want to talk to. But I've learned so many great ideas from people like the two of you and many others, and I take those ideas back and I use them in my own teaching. So,
well, that's the whole point of these events, right?
Yeah. So
you really prescribe to. You never stop learning.
Never.
Right? I mean,
never. And it's still continuing.
That's so great to hear. I mean, and I think that, because I think I can speak for Sebastian here, or he can speak for himself, that
how dare you,
that we prescribe to this 100%, that we're always students, no matter what. And we're also always teachers too. And I think that another thing that I'm a big fan of is my students teaching each other and teaching themselves. And
that's a great idea, and the other thing about that is that I encourage my students to go take lessons with a lot of people.
Absolutely.
I know some people feel differently about that. I only want you studying from me and hearing what my concept is. I think it's great to hear ideas from a lot of people and put those all together. And you don't have to accept everything, but the more ideas you have, eventually you think back and you say, that was great. I'm going to use that with, so again, you're always learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so cool because I encourage the same thing. And I think something that students will realize when they study with multiple people is that there's not one version of success. There's not one way to do things. And to see that, oh, like I can figure things out. Like this person does it this way and this person does it this way. Like it's so important. And like, I don't want to be the sole responsibility of every single thing that this student knows.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe someone else says something in a different way. And oh, thank you. You got through to him on his articulation. Like, that's great.
Or they confirm what you're trying to prove, which is also a good feeling. It's like, see, I told you.
Yeah. And you can't be only, you have to be multifaceted, I think, as a teacher, because sometimes if you say something one way, the student doesn't get it. And if you don't have another way to say it, they probably won't learn. So you try this, maybe it doesn't work. And then you kind of go around and you try a different approach. And then it's kind of like, oh yeah. And the flip side of that coin is my students go and take lessons from other people when they prepare for grad school. And they'll come back sometimes and they'll say, wow, what a great teacher. I studied from so-and-so and he told me to do this and it really worked. And my thought was, well, I've been telling you that for a few years now.
Totally. Absolutely.
So hearing it sometimes from somebody else is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And one of the things here too is I love the area. Here we are in Kalamazoo and we're 2 hours from Detroit and we're 2 hours from Chicago. And I love taking students over to hear Detroit Symphony or Chicago Symphony concerts. But I do wish more students would go over and get lessons with some of the guys in Chicago. And they do on occasion. But, there's so many great opportunities there. And I really try to encourage that.
Well,
and not only that, you're like 5 minutes from the Bell's Brewery.
That is true. A very popular place here.
Yeah. Yeah. And my first trombone teacher plays in the Kalamazoo Symphony, Kip Hickman.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I studied with him growing up in Detroit and he was a huge influence in my life.
Yeah. Well, we've had a number of people playing Kalamazoo Symphony who have gone on and are well-known trombonists. And of course, Randy Hawes, I think, played in Battle Creek 20 minutes from here. I think that was one of his first gigs, I believe.
I mean, he went to Central Michigan, right?
Central Michigan. Yeah.
And then just moved down the street to Detroit for a little gig there, huh?
Yeah. He's done pretty well for himself. So.
Yeah, exactly. So was your path directly from Louisiana up to Kalamazoo, or was there a stop along the way?
It was directly from Louisiana up to Kalamazoo.
And when did this happen?
This was in 1986.
Okay.
And I had been there for 6 years and decided I wanted to look for other jobs. The school had probably 120 music majors. When I came in, I think there was only one trombone major.
Oh, wow.
So I was able to build it to 18 majors after 6 years. So, and they had, at that time, they had a lot of scholarship money. And I don't think it's that way now, but almost any student who wanted to come could come for just about a full scholarship if they were willing to play in marching band. So it was attractive to a lot of students who didn't want to pay large bills. So I was able to build that program up. And that was, I think, one of the selling points when I applied up here was, here's somebody who's really active in recruiting and can build a program.
Well, sure. If you can put down on a piece of paper in a clear way, hey, I went from one trombone major and in 6 years grew to 18. That's unheard of. That's really, that's pretty intense. Yeah.
And some good players too. I had some really fine players in the studio. Mike Chris at University of, not the one at Youngstown, but at North Carolina, University of North Carolina.
Yeah. Okay. Mike was, I know the name. I've spent a little bit of time in North Carolina, so that's how I know the name. Mike's
a fine player. Mike was one of my students, and Mark Dickman at University of North Florida was another one who had studied from me. So I had several. There were a few others. I had several players who were really outstanding in that program, and I think recruiting is something I've always been actively involved in. It's not something I really enjoy doing, but it's a necessity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What advice would you give to, someone starting out in a similar position? They're out of school, they finally get a position like this, but maybe they're starting with one person, or they're not starting with a ton of scholarship money, or their school might not necessarily have the name recognition that just automatically gets people applying every year. I mean, you built this studio from that one student, and now you just have this incredible culture there, and you have, students, you just see them in the ITA competitions every year, winning ITA competitions, American Trombone Workshop, doing really well. And it's not like you're getting the Juilliard auditioners every year necessarily. You built this program, and what, obviously this was over a long period of time, and I'm sure there was a lot of trial and error, but I mean, what were some of your philosophies going forward in building the culture that you have now?
I think one of the things that's really worked for me is trying to build a connection with the student. Sometimes it's contacting them. A lot of times they contact me, but I always try to follow up with an email, even a few weeks later. Hey, I really enjoyed, if you ever want to come back, love to have you here. How can I help you with your audition? Those kinds of things. I try to build some kind of connection, and I feel like I'm pretty good at it. I feel like I haven't always been good at it, but I've kind of managed to make it work. So I think that's one of the real key things is you have to get to know the students. And the interesting thing you said there, I think that's the thing that I'm probably most proud about where I'm at now at Western Michigan. Most of my students, and especially for about the first 7 or 8 years when we were starting to have this success, whereas we were competing against students from conservatories that were attracting students worldwide, most of my students were coming from within 120 miles of Kalamazoo. That, for me, is something I am really proud of, because we're talking Michigan students, and they are, and they're talented. They're good kids. They want to learn. That's part of the challenge, I think, when they're here, is to try to get them inspired and let them know they've got the ability and potential to do great things. So that's the real challenge. And once they're convinced of that, then they can do great things.
Well, I really like that perspective of instilling confidence with, obviously expected work ethic. And you touched on that briefly before, but when you have this package, you really can do a lot of good things. It's just a matter of believing in yourself and putting in the work.
Yeah. The other thing is I try to teach them how to practice. I think that's an important part, because in high school, I mean, we know how it is. A lot of them, they practice some, but they don't practice a lot, and they have a lot of activities going on. So one of the things I try to teach them, I think, is kind of guided by an article that I have all of my students read, and it's from 2006. It actually appeared in Fortune magazine, and it's called "What It Takes to Be Great." So it talks about playing golf, or being a chess grandmaster, or being a musician, various things. But it talks about that research shows that lack of natural talent is irrelevant to great success. It's all about demanding practice, and a specific type of practice. So one of the paragraphs here, I think this pretty much describes it. He uses the phrase, or the term, deliberate practice is the kind of practice that we need to try to develop. He says the best people in any field are those who devote the most hours to what the researchers call deliberate practice. It's an activity that is intended to improve performance, that reaches for objectives just beyond one's level of competence, provides feedback on results, and involves high levels of repetition. For example, simply hitting a bucket of balls is not deliberate practice, which is why most golfers don't get better. Case in point right here. Hitting an 8-iron 300 times with the goal of leaving the ball within 20 feet of the pin 80% of the time, continually observing results and making appropriate adjustments, and doing that for hours every day. That's deliberate practice. And I'm kind of reminded, I'm going to embarrass her with this, but Hanna Bella Glavitz did her undergrad here. She studied for me for 2 years in high school also. So I had the pleasure of teaching her for 6 years. But I remember one time she came into a lesson, and I don't remember what piece she put on the stand, but she came in and she says, I just spent 45 minutes on that one measure, and I think I finally got it. And I think a lot of students, what'll happen is they will simply play through things day after day. And it really never gets better. It's kind of like hitting a bucket of balls, but you really don't have any set goals in mind. So
Right.
that's kind of the type of practice that I try to instill in the students,
I belong to a small little golf club here in West Michigan where I spend my summers, and the pro at the club I've taken many lessons with ever since I was a little kid. And I went to him last summer and I said, I'm not a great golfer by any means. I'm a decent amateur golfer. And I went to him and I said, the one thing I'd be very curious in learning from you is how to effectively use the driving range, how to effectively use the practice facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I've been a pro for 30 years and not a single person has ever asked me that question.
Mm.
And I said, well, I'm a musician, like the idea of deliberate practice, because I could feel myself going out there. And I had watched various pros like Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson and Dustin Johnson or something like that in their warm-up routines, and all of them are different, but the deliberation is important and the repetition is important. But I found for me, where I am in my game, I can't look at Tiger Woods, and what he does. My problems are much different than his because they're much more vast. And so I wanted to know how I could effectively use it. And for various reasons, we ran out of time last summer, but I'm scheduling to get with him to do that this summer, because it's the same thing. I actually use golf analogies a lot in teaching, whether someone plays golf or not, because I think the practice method is in the repetition and the difficulty of the game really lends itself well to music.
Yeah. Sports analogies are great in music. And one thing is, we talk about Michael Jordan and how great he is, but he got cut from his high school basketball team. So here's a guy think about the hard work he put in. It's not about talent. It's about practice and deliberate practice. I like to tell my students it's about 10% talent and about 90% hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe he won't like this, but I think he would agree with me. I went to high school with Evan Conroy.
Yeah.
And Evan, I think, would agree with me. Evan is now the bass trombonist of the Louisiana Philharmonic, and a fabulous bass trombonist. Recently became a doctor, a graduate of Indiana University. But he's the bass trombonist of the Louisiana Philharmonic. And when I left high school, he's two grades below me. He was not a great trombone player. And I remember I was living in San Francisco at the time. He sent me a tape. He was applying to an ITF competition. Mm-hmm. And I think it was a Tom Ritter George. And he sent me this tape, and I was like, this isn't Evan. There's no way that this is Evan. And he was in the middle of studying with you. And I just wrote back, I was astounded. I mean, the work, and I said, what? Like, is there something in the water in Kalamazoo? What are you doing? And he said, man, I tell you, I'm in the practice room all day, every day. I'm putting the nose to the grindstone. And that's what
that guy was practicing 5 hours a day.
Yeah.
I mean, he was always practicing. And here's an interesting story about Evan. He probably doesn't know we're talking. He's going to hear this and say, oh my gosh, what's he going to say? Evan came to school here at Western Michigan University. And one day, I can't remember if I got an email or somebody knocked on my door, but they said, hey, I'm interested in auditioning for the trombone studio. I said, okay, are you a high school senior? And it come to find out it's a student who's already here. And my first thought was, well, I've not had real good luck with students who come without auditioning to want to be in the program, because, the ones that are really solid are probably going to audition at a lot of schools with good scholarship money. And so I said, well, yeah, let's set up a lesson and let me hear you play. So, here's a guy that at the time he was a tenor trombone.
Yes. He had a silver Bach 42. I remember.
Oh my gosh. I forgot about that. But yeah. So Evan walks in, he has a lesson. And one of the things I always do in an audition or in a lesson is I like to find out what kind of high and low register they have. So Evan played something for me down low. And I said, man, you sound like a bass trombonist. Have you ever thought about changing? He said, yeah. And he said, yeah, Nick Schwartz went to the same high school as me. I said, no way. So I think you were kind of a model for him. But we switched him to bass, and I had him working on some Paul Felice, some low note studies, and playing him loud with attacks. And anyways, there's a routine that I use there.
The great late Paul Felice. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was so interesting. He just within a year, I think he was a finalist and I think maybe a winner in the American Trombone Workshop competition, the Division II, I believe, and then a finalist in the Yaxley, and he ended up getting in round top. And then when he graduated, he was the only bass trombonist to get in. This is when Jim Markey was teaching at Juilliard. He was
Yeah.
the only bass trombonist to get in Juilliard and also in Manhattan.
Yep.
And I'll never forget because he called me after taking those auditions, and he says, "Hey, Dr. Wolfinbarger, I don't know. I think I've set my sights too high." And I said, I don't know. I said, well, let's wait and see, and I'll make a few calls for you, and we'll have some backups and that kind of thing. So a few weeks later, he gets a letter, and he calls me, and he's like real calm and somewhat nervous, and he says, Dr. Wolfenbarger says, I got a letter from Juilliard. I said, oh yeah, well, what did it say? He says, I got in. I said, well, there you go.
Yeah.
And a few days later, he got one from Manhattan, and he got in Manhattan too.
Yeah.
Those are the best moments as teachers.
Oh, awesome. Absolutely awesome. Just one of the best. And you cherish those. And that's what keeps me coming back year after year.
But all this brings me back to something you were touching on, especially with Evan, is motivation. You know, we agree that the work ethic and the joy for the playing is so important. And of course, if they have talent, that even helps more. But, you know, so many teachers struggle with this. I don't know one teacher that doesn't struggle with when you see a student that has potential, that figures things out well, but you just can't get them motivated. You can't get them to want to do it or feel the urgency.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this is something we all deal with. Do you have to let go at some point or a combination? But what kind of strategies do you do when you're dealing with a student like that?
What I try to do is I sit down with my students, and first lesson, we talk about what their strengths and weaknesses are, what they want to do with their career, and we kind of set a game plan. If they want to be an orchestral player, we'll work on excerpts. If they want to be in a military band, maybe we'll work on technique and add excerpts. University teaching. So we have a game plan that we have. The other thing is to keep them motivated. I try to set, I think it's important, and we've heard this before, but it's important to have really lofty goals. We're not talking just about short-term goals. Those are important, but I'm also talking about long-term goals. I encourage my students to do competitions. I don't require them to do it, but I encourage them. And it's been interesting as they have done the competitions that they have made more progress knowing that on November 1, they have to record. And they have 6 weeks, and they need to start rehearsing with their pianist, and they have to figure out how to play that line that's so difficult. It really keeps them motivated, as compared with, say, today we're going to go through our Rochu, our Tyrell, our Sauer, clef studies, and the same old thing as you had last week. So I think the goals are really important. And I think there are some other things too. I feel like I take an interest in the students, and I think they see that. And Evan said something to me one time that was revealing, and I had no idea. He came in for a lesson, and he says, when you're disappointed in your students, we can tell. We really feel like crap. That's what he said.
It's a powerful tool.
It's a powerful tool.
Absolutely.
And I don't try to convey that, but I think they read me pretty well. And I'm not one, I do lecture the students. And on a rare occasion, I've even told them, look, come back when you're ready. We're going to end this lesson early. I can think of a few occasions I've sent them out to study with the grad assistant. Sometimes that's what it takes. But I think they can kind of read my face that I'm disappointed, and it makes them feel bad. So I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm glad it works out that way.
Well, I would say the other side of the same coin is the students have obviously a deep respect for you, because if you don't really care for or respect someone, what does it matter to you if they're disappointed in you? Right. Because disappointment, I think, is one of the most powerful tools, but you can't make it powerful unless the student or the person respects you, whatever the situation may be.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I try to do in my teaching is develop a close bond with the students. And I think it's important for a number of reasons. I mean, here you have students who are 18 years old that are leaving home. Mom and dad may be as close as a phone call, but they're not right there. And sometimes they need somebody to talk to. And I want them to know, and I know not all teachers will do this, and that's okay. Everybody has their own style. I want them to know that they can walk in and talk with me at any time, and that I'm going to try to help them through. And also, I think students have a lot of problems these days. They're just dealing with a lot. And sometimes to help them as performers, we have to get them past some of these personal issues that they're dealing with. And so having a good relationship with the student is important. I also stress to the students it's important to have a relationship within the studio with each other. Because if there's a bad apple in there and they're not getting along with somebody who's in an ensemble, it can cause friction. So, I encourage, had 3 new freshmen come in this year, great kids, fantastic kids. And I told the upperclassmen, I said, go meet with these students, take them out for, for dessert or something.
Right.
Go get together with them. Let's get to know them and make them feel like they're a part of the studio.
Yeah, I my time when I was at Juilliard, I thought was one of the most important things for me in my growth was I remember it was one of my first days. I'm living in the dorms, and in the dorms they have practice rooms. They're very small and terrible, but they're there. And so I'm practicing in this room, and the guy who the bass trombonist who's was a year ahead of me, Ben Green, who now plays in Switzerland in Bern, he knocked on my practice room. He goes, "Are you Nick Schwartz?"
Who's asking?
Who's asking? And I said, yeah, I am. He said, I'm Ben Green. He said, we're going out right now for pizza. You're coming. And I was like, okay, and it was like 90% of the trombone studio. And we went to this pizza place and I got to meet everyone. And it's like, I would have met everyone, but that gesture of bringing me in and bringing me into their, culture so quickly. And it was like that with playing too. Sometimes people would knock on your door and just open it and come in and say, okay, I heard you playing that excerpt, play it again for me. And it became that wasn't weird. We trusted each other. We competed with each other, which was important, but it was healthy and fun competition. And it was such a great environment.
And then that situation, you felt much more comfortable.
Absolutely.
Because people, you knew you were accepted. You knew you could go to others for help. I had a student that started last year, fall semester, named Tony Colella. And we found out about a position that opened in the U.S. Army Field Band. And Tony says, I want to audition for it. And so I said, yeah, let's do it. So he got the music and we started working on it. Tony was going around to everybody in the studio playing these excerpts. He would have parties where they would just come in and for 45 minutes, they would call off these excerpts. There was a good bond between the students. He felt like he could ask their advice. He would have them write notes, and he ended up winning a job. So he's just starting. So only finished a semester of classes here.
Wow.
And so how do you go about fostering that within? Because as a teacher, there's so much you can do, but there's nothing like having them motivating each other and encouraging each other and doing exactly what Nick was talking about. Is it more about finding the right students? Is it, really encouraging leadership within the studio? Are there things you can do, like activities wise? Like what do you do to kind of build that camaraderie?
The very first meeting, we set up a meeting the first week of school. And I talk to the students about the expectations, and I make it known that is something I expect them to do. I expect them to get together and work with each other. I think that camaraderie is really important. So that's something I really, really encourage him toward. I'll follow up on that a week or two later, and I'll talk to him about that and say, hey, have you gotten together with Abby? And well, you need to do that. So I think that's an important part of it. The other thing about finding student with a good work ethic and seeing them progress, recruiting students is an interesting process. And what I have found, sometimes I've had some really highly talented students come in that maybe didn't have quite the GPA of somebody who was maybe not quite as strong, but I knew had a great work ethic because they had a 4.0 GPA. So as a result, I've been trying to encourage students to come that are very bright. And I think the GPA within the studio right now is probably about a 3.8, 3.7. It's a high.
Trombone players aren't supposed to be that smart.
I know.
Man.
I have to tell you, I wish I had that kind of GPA when I was in high school, but I didn't. So, yeah, they over the years you live and learn, and you know kind of what kind of you try to look for a certain kind of student and who's going to fit in and who's going to be a good hard worker. And if somebody comes in and they've got a 4-point GPA, I know they're going to work hard.
What's so amazing about this fact is how successful you've been in building this studio. And, you know, and we talked about it briefly before, but you don't currently play the trombone anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been able to communicate and teach on such a high level. So I'm curious, has this, because that you can't just pick up your trombone and show it all the time, has it kind of enabled you to develop teaching skills that you may not have had previous that has really helped? Because I feel like this can help people that, you know, band directors or anyone that wants to encourage better playing but aren't able to demonstrate.
Right. Yeah, great question. So let me give just a little background about that. So I came to Western Michigan in 1986, and I had only been there 1 year, and it was the summer of 87. Actually, it was May. I can tell you when. It was May, early May, I think, of 1987. Very stressful year I had. The difficulty of getting acclimated. We were moving into a new home. I was studying for my doctoral exams. I mean, there was a lot going on. I played in our faculty brass quintet, the Western Brass Quintet. We were getting ready to perform at the International Trumpet Guild. And I picked up my horn one day. And I started splitting attacks, and I couldn't seem to correct it. Now, this started on a second space C. It was the strangest thing. And I thought, what is going on? And I practiced for maybe an hour and finally gave it up. And I said, you know, I'll come back tomorrow and it'll be fine. So picked up my horn the next day, same thing, same problem. So over the course of a few weeks, it seemed to get worse and worse. And whereas it started out on one note, it gradually started moving up my register, and it was pretty soon F and B flat, tuning note B flat. And I went to a couple of doctors. I thought this has to be something physical. Nobody had any idea. And I found out about the Performing Arts, the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, which is at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. And the person who founded that, her name was Dr. Alice Branfenbrenner. And she was a leading authority on focal dystonia. And so we set up an appointment. I went over and talked with her. She said, bring your horn. And I thought, this is awesome. You know, I've not met with any of the other doctors where they said, bring your horn. I want to see you play. So I went over and took my horn. She watched me play. They hooked up nerve endings and tested the nerves and to see what was happening there. Everything was normal. We came back in and she said, I think you've got focal dystonia. And she says, what I want to do is refer you to Dr. Arnold Jacobs. I said, well, okay, I know who he is. He was a kind of a legend. And I think he may have retired from the Chicago Symphony. It was about the time of his retirement. So I had a lesson with Arnold Jacobs, and I also scheduled a lesson with Charlie Vernon. Neither really could help me. It just seemed nothing as great a teacher as Arnold Jacobs was. Nothing he said really helped. The one thing he said at the end, he says, quit beating yourself up, and every time you practice, play something that you can play well, if nothing else, to build confidence. So I was kind of resigned to the fact that I had focal dystonia at that time. And I managed to continue in our faculty brass quintet for probably another 10 years after that. And finally, I said, I can't do this anymore. And I gave it up. And so, and I still play a little bit. It's very subtle. I'll play some in lessons, mostly related to low register. It kind of works for me down there, but I don't play a lot. But the interesting thing is, everybody I studied from, with the exception of John Kitzman, I took some lessons with John when I was at University of North Texas. None of my teachers ever played. And I kind of had that model from each of them. And none of them would pick up the horn and say, here's how you do it. They would just play, or they would just tell me what to do. And we would talk maybe about the air. We would talk about how that affected musicality, articulation, things like that. So it was all verbal. And that's the way I teach. Yeah.
So, that's great. Yeah, my first teacher, my first college teacher was Don Harwood. And he rarely played in lessons. I mean, maybe twice in my 4 years did I hear him play. And so it was very verbal and incredibly effective. So I can relate. I can understand that's, you know, if you
and of course the one example we all talk about who never played was Emery Remington.
I didn't know that actually.
Yeah. I've never found a student that studied from Emery Remington that ever saw him pick up a horn. Maybe he did in his early days. I think he came to Eastman. He was at Eastman very young, but I don't think I've never come across anybody who's ever seen him play. So Remington is an example, and there are others.
Well, yeah, of course, yeah.
So I imagine you do a lot of singing.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine getting a young person that doesn't have a lot of good sounds in their ear. Are you encouraging recordings, them to listen a lot?
Yeah,
and things like
recordings are important, and I encourage the students obviously to record themselves. But I'm fortunate to have a pretty good voice, and I sing a lot in lessons.
Well, going back to your dad, right?
Going back to my dad, absolutely. I look at that now and I say that was important.
Yeah,
I think it was an important part of my career. So when we talk about shaping phrases or finding high points, you can sing it, and I've got a good ear. I've been blessed with a good ear, so I've been very fortunate in that regard. So that's something that was important, and of course being able to write out music at an early age. I think I can hear intervals and things like that. So these were all developments early in my career that really I think had an impact on me.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just kind of building on what we were talking about before this, you've been able to successfully build such a tradition, and so time and time again, you have strong studios. So you're talking about good role models. They're right there walking the same halls. As far as sound role models. So I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy here.
Yeah, I was concerned when I first started developing focal dystonia. I was thinking, what are my students going to think? And are they going to miss me playing? And it's been interesting that over all these years, I've never had one student say, I wish he could play. It's just not really been an issue.
And I can confirm from the other side, I've never heard one of your students mention that at all when they talk about you. The first 10 things out of their mouths are how awesome you are and how great you are and how amazing you are as a teacher. So
that's awesome. Great kids.
Well, Steve, that's incredibly inspiring to hear. And I mean, that just shows us all the tools we have available, within ourselves to teach that, it's not just about, which obviously it does help, can be a useful tool, but, there's so much more we can do with really developing how we communicate and really getting through to people. And one thing I really wanted to make sure to ask you about, I've been told by multiple sources that you are quite the Arthur Pryor guru. And I just wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit and just hear about your history with it and maybe some unique things that the average trombonist may not know about Arthur Pryor, your general approach and teaching and playing it.
Yeah, so I think this goes back to my study, first of all, with my undergrad. I think my teacher really emphasized technique. That was something I got from Joe Nicholson. And then when I started studying from Vern Cagrice, he was a real lover of music of Arthur Pryor and of that tradition. And I'll never forget going to the workshop. I think it was must have been about 1983. And they had a panel discussion with Bob Isley, Jim Erdman, Larry Weehee, and I'm missing somebody, I think. But anyway, it was a panel discussion there with 3 or 4 of the greats of that tradition. And he set up a lesson where I could play for all of them. And it was the most amazing thing. So that's always been a love of mine. I think for students to really understand that style, they have to listen to it. And it's like anything, but it's kind of a free rubato feel within a pulse, but you have to have that freedom. You can't take Arthur Pryor and play it strict and in time. Not, at least if you want to play it like Bob Isley. So I love that material. And I think it's great it's only one part of a student's development, but it's an important part of what they do to develop facility.
I mean, hearing those recordings of Arthur Pryor,
unbelievable.
He was
incredible.
So free with time, yet within the structure and technically amazing. And just like, he was such a showman and a marketer and he's one of the most famous musicians in the world, in the country at the time. The things he did for us.
Yeah. One of the things, because I don't play, one of the things I like to do is encourage people, if they want to go to my SoundCloud page, I've got probably 3 or 4 recordings of me playing Arthur Pryor, Bluebells, Annie Laurie, Every. It was a performance at the International Trombone Festival. Bluebells was with band. So I love for people to hear those because it's not something I do these days. But I've tried to play all of those within the style of the early 90s.
Pre SoundCloud and pre everything being available on the internet, I remember going back to Evan Conroy, him playing me a recording of you doing that. I think it was on mini disc at this point, and
yeah,
and he played this for me, and it truly is excellent.
Oh, thank you.
So I think everyone should go check that out, certainly to get a little taste of the style, because it's something that you've really poured your heart and soul into, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, you said sound of the early 1900s. Is that what you said? Do you think we should play it on smaller instruments? I mean, what do you think the ideal size of trombone is?
I think if you want to have that original approach, I think this a small instrument. And I don't know if you've seen the trombone that Arthur Pryor played, but it was like under 500 bore.
Oh man!
I think they've got one at Interlaken, and of course Steve Dillon had one too. Yeah, really small equipment. But you know, if you're competing in like the Weehee competition, almost everybody plays it with a large bore, and I think that's kind of what the judges are used to hearing. So even though I think if you want to do it in authentic style, I still have my student do it on a 547 bore. 532 would be better.
Wow. But that probably feels truly like a pea shooter coming from a large bore, you know.
Oh yeah, for sure.
532. That's tight.
I do it on my 525. I do it on my 36.
On the 36. It's fun. Yeah. So
super fun.
Yeah. So that and you know, if you want to go even more authentic, then you can pick up a 508 or a 500 bore. But boy,
that's when I get nervous.
It's hard. It's hard to do. There's one recording on my page of I think it's Fantastic Polka, and it was from when I taught at McNeese State. And the hall down there was really bad. I'll have to say that hall was just one of the worst. So I played Fantastic Polka, and it came off really well. And I remember because of the quality of the hall and the quality of the recording, it sounded like it was like 1902. So it's on the SoundCloud page. You'll hear it, but it was probably 1985.
You were so authentic. You time traveled. Incredible.
Yeah, right.
Need to add some record popping.
Wax wheel. Let's go back further.
That's all I needed. Yeah, exactly.
So there's something I like to ask everyone we have on our podcast. It's kind of become the thing I want at the end of this, which is, what do you, especially you as a educator, what do you find that young students or students in general don't do enough of and they need to do more of?
Listening and recording themselves. They've got to do it. And you know, I'm constantly telling my students they need to record themselves more. And I think that's one of the biggest things. A good example, Andy Mitchell. So Andy, we worked on Bolero for a while, and it seemed like every single week it was coming in. He was still having time problems. And he came in one week, and it was amazing. And I said, Andy, what did you do? I said, we've been talking about this all semester. And he says, I recorded myself, and I finally realized what I was doing. So
it's so crazy, that thing you were telling me to do every week. I actually did it, and it worked.
Yeah. So anyway, I think recording themselves is really something that they need to do more of.
Yeah, well, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I agree with everything you've said so far. So, Steve, it's been a real pleasure. I've learned a lot just talking to you. And I know we didn't dive into every little detail of your career, but it's been really great getting to know you in this way. I mean, obviously I know you, but like for our podcast to get to know you. And I think that it's incredible what you've done, and the program you've built at Western Michigan is just fantastic.
Well, I admire you guys, I'll have to tell you. And the podcasts are fantastic. When the first one came out, I sent it to my studio and I said, you guys need to listen to this. And they've been listening to them ever
That's
since.
great.
These are really great. I think you guys do such a fantastic job, and the guests you've been having. When I got the email from you about being a guest, I was like, oh, you want me?
Well, yeah.
But you just had some fantastic people, and you guys just make it such an entertaining thing that everybody wants to hear it. It's really awesome.
Thank you very much. And sometime we'll have to have you up as a guest here at the Trombone Retreat, live and in person.
Oh yeah. Well, I look forward to meeting you in person sometime, and hopefully we can go hang out at Bell's.
Oh, you bet.
Because that's still a pilgrimage I want to have.
Yeah, let me know when you come to Kalamazoo. We'll get together.
Sounds like fun to me.
Absolutely.
Well, I, for one, found our talk with Steve to be really insightful. I felt really inspired after talking to him.
Yeah, you see why every student we talk to just lights up when they talk about him. He's just one of those professors that really connects with all of his students, and you can tell he goes the extra mile. You know, their success means a lot to him, and you can see that, and you can see that in the way they play. It's just really cool to see, and it makes me really excited to talk to more professors on this podcast.
Absolutely, because I mean, we're going to go down that road for sure and talk to more professors. It's definitely, as we all know, people who have studied music, that relationship we have with our professor or our teacher, whatever their title may be, that relationship is very sacred, you know, between student and teacher. And our future in so many ways is in their hands, not just trombone, but like molding us as human beings. And I mean, they're not solely responsible, but that relationship that we have, because it's one-on-one, the nature of that is so unique. It's so important that, you know, we as teachers too respect that relationship and never forget that people are coming to us with pretty intimate things like playing. There's something, when you play for someone, there is an intimate aspect to that. And he knows how to garner trust and respect, and without, it's not demanding it. It just happens naturally because of his character and because of his quality. So I think that came through in the interview, and it comes through in every conversation we have with people who have spent time with him.
Yeah. And I like what you're saying. It's there's a vulnerability there with your teacher, and you know, these students are starting, if you're starting undergrad, they're coming to school. It's the first time they're leaving home. It's the most formidable time of their life. They're becoming who they are. They're going to discover who they are. It's such a transitional moment, and it can be really hard, especially now, starting now. And you're literally spending more time with this one person than you will with anyone else on campus.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite a responsibility. And at the same time, I think about this a lot, and I'd be curious to hear kind of how you look at it. And we both had teachers that were full-time performers at the same time. So, you know, you can go to schools where the professor's main job is being the professor. They're there every single day, around you every day, a resource. And then you can go to a school where you may be studying with some super famous guy in the New York Philharmonic, and you may just see him once a week. And both are very valuable, but you kind of have to have a different mindset. So I kind of, since my teachers weren't always like hovering in a way, I learned a lot of self-reliance. And I don't know, with my students, my goal is I don't want them dependent on me, because, you know, after 4 years, I want them to be confident. I want them to be self-starters. I want them to be able to teach themselves and hopefully hear my voice in their head when they're going through a problem they're trying to figure out. But it's a fine line, because you want to be there for them, but you want to like teach them how to be resilient, you know?
Well, I've thought a lot about this over the years, but especially now, that when you're a young student and you're deciding where you want to go to school, there is this aspect that a lot of young people just don't know, and they need to think about, I think, which is, what sort of relationship are you looking for with a teacher? Are you looking for a place like Western Michigan, for example, where, Dr. Wolfinbarger that's his job. That's what he's there to do. And he's going to be there for you more just by nature, because he's in his office all day, every day. Or are you going to want to go to a conservatory where you're going to be probably in a bigger city, but you're only going to see your professor once a week because their main job is to perform. And I am the teacher just because of the nature of, and you are as well, we're performers, and we teach as well. So it's not that we don't take that job seriously. The exact opposite. I take teaching very seriously. Why else would we have the trombone retreat? Why else would I teach at 3 different places? I enjoy teaching. It's very important to me, but I can't be there the way that a professor at a university can be. So young students, I think, need to ask that question when they're applying for schools. What sort of relationship do you want going forward? And both have their benefits. I don't want to say, well, there is downside of only seeing your professor once a week when you're going to study with someone like us, just because of time. But it is outweighed, hopefully, by the quality of time that we do spend together. But, it is an important thing to take in, because some people do need that extra time at the beginning of their education with a little bit more time to kind of learn that self-reliance. And I think some people, when they go to conservatories, miss that a little bit and could benefit from having that in their life. And then maybe for their masters, go somewhere more like a conservatory and have that environment. It's just something to think about, I think. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's completely individual.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the biggest determiner of your success is you. And the same thing John Kitzman told me my freshman year in my first lesson, and it threw me for a loop. And I think he expected that, because he says this line to all of his students. I think he looks you in the eye. He's like, the best teacher in the world for you is in this room right now. And it's not me. And for a second, you're like, wow, this guy's confident. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I guess the way I look at it is, what I tell my students, I'm going to tell you every single thing I know. I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to tell you what's required for what your goals are in life. But, I'm with you 1 hour a week, maybe more with trombone classes and everything. You're the one that, it's the classic, I'm going to lead you to the door, but you're the one that's going to have to walk through it. You're the one that, I can do everything but this. So it comes on you ultimately. And so building that self-reliance and not getting them, because you don't want a student dependent on you. You want to build that trust, I think. But if it's like, if they're scared to graduate, at the end, because they don't know what to do and they need to ask you how to do everything, I think that's the balance that you have to navigate.
Absolutely. And one thing I'm trying, always, but especially now with the current situation that we're all online, I'm trying to really build this at Manus. I teach a class at Manus, brass performance class. And normally in that class, we would be reading through symphonies and, have master classes, a variety of things surrounding brass performance. But we can't read through symphonies right now, can we? So I have started doing this thing where I will assign a person to play and then assign another person to teach. And I will, give my input for 5 minutes to the player. And then the teacher takes over and will teach the other person. And what I want to kind of prove through that is like, hey, I'm not the only one in this room. Just because I'm the professor here, I'm not the only one in this room with good ideas. All your colleagues have good ideas, and something that's going to break through with a problem you might be having. You never know where that inspiration is going to come from. It could come from a person, let's say you're a senior, and it could come from the new incoming freshman. You never know. And so I want to build this environment at Manus of not only self-reliance, like you're talking about, but also reliance on the people around them for the same reasons. Hey, you only get me 1 hour a week. Hey, you only get your private lesson teacher 1 hour a week. So really like honing in on, hey, I got all these teachers around me, including myself. Why don't I lean on them more and send them an excerpt or send them a recording of my etude? And, I kind of want to put this out there to our listeners, like to those of you who are in school, or maybe even not, maybe you just got out of school. maybe build a Facebook group on Messenger of 10 people. Could be your studio, could be your friend group, and just say, hey, like, let's have the place where, like, I trust you all. I'm gonna just pop an etude in here, and can I get your advice? Can I get a little bit of, hey, I'm having a problem. Do you hear this in my sound? Like a little 10-second clip, and just a place where you can learn and grow and teach. And, you know, I think that's the environment I grew up with when I was in school. And that was the most beneficial part of it, was the people I was around, and how, not only how great they were, but how great they were at helping other people and willing to do so.
Man, I was smiling while you were saying that, because every time I picture you as the professor at Manus, it just makes me laugh, and not in a weird way, but just since I went there and just imagining my friend Nick being my teacher there, that would just be it's a weird combination in my head.
Well, I think a lot of people think it's weird.
But I love what you said, and I think in addition to that, what's so important is it develops active critical listening skills. Because if you're so used to just waiting for someone to say something, like your teacher to say something, and you're never thinking, not critically, but constructively, whenever you hear something, you need to know why you do or do not like it. That helps you develop teaching your own self and teaching others eventually. And you got to start thinking that way from, you know, freshman year. I'm in trombone class at Southern Methodist University with John Kitzman. Freshman year, you know, I was a freshman, the next oldest guy was a junior, and the rest were grad students. And everyone plays in trombone class, and he, you know, a grad student plays, and he calls on me immediately. Okay, what'd you hear? What needs to be better? And it's like scary, because you don't want to criticize a grad student, but it wasn't personal. That's just the good way to do it.
Yeah, when I was at Interlochen, Tom Riccobono, the teacher there, we would have studio class, and we usually would set up kind of in a circle. We were in the gym at Interlochen, and the person playing would stand in the middle of the circle, play what they're going to play, and he would go around, and each person had to say a compliment and a criticism. And that was my first experience of relying on people of my own age group rather than like a teacher, you know, because I was 17 years old when I went there. And so suddenly I realized, like, oh, I have like a bunch of people around me that are super smart and can give me a lot of good information. And so that's when it started for me. And then from there, it really became something big in my life, like playing for other people. And I think the more you do it early on in your life, just like anything, like if you learn how to ski when you're young, it's a lot easier than learn how to ski when you're 30, right? If you get in the habit of recording yourself, if you get in the habit of playing for other people, get in the habit of having an active listening tradition in your life, be it like, okay, at 7:00 every night, I'm going to listen to a new symphony, whatever. If you build these habits in your life of listening and playing and teaching and being critical of listening and playing and all these things, I think it's really easy to do, but it becomes harder if you don't do it often. If you just play mock auditions when you're preparing for a recital or preparing for an audition, they're going to feel really nervous and really weird and out of place. But if you're playing for other people all the time, that situation is not going to be so weird.
Absolutely. Transitioning away from serious teacher talk for a moment, some good news in your life, I noticed, and I still haven't had the privilege of meeting this new person in your life, but you have a new little pup.
I got a puppy.
New little puppy.
His name is Kikiriki, which means peanut.
Rolls off the tongue.
It means peanut in Serbian. We call him Kiki for short. He's I'd never heard of this breed. They call him Schweenies, which is it's a mix of Dachshund and Shih Tzu. And our little Kiki is definitely more on the Dachshund side in appearance, but we're starting to see a little bit of the Shih Tzu because his father was a miniature Dachshund, short hair, and so mainly he's very flat, short, smooth hair, but we see little bits of long fur poking out, and it's like he looks like an old man when old men start getting hair growing out of their ears and stuff like that.
And he's tiny, right?
He's just over 3 pounds, and he's only going to get between probably 5 to 10 pounds, but closer to 5 pounds.
Oh man. So everyone check out Nick's Instagram and see these ridiculously cute pictures if you need an escape from the day.
Well, the amazing thing is, you know how most dogs have black eyes. He has like hazel blue eyes. I mean, the most beautiful eyes. It's really unbelievable.
You should write a poem about it.
Oh, I'm gonna write mini odes. I sing to him every day.
Oh, that's great.
I sing to every person I love pretty much every day.
Aw.
Well, you know, Sebastian, I've sang to you many times, usually in the form of trombone solos.
Lately, yeah, but I've been enjoying it.
So I'm kind of limited in my repertoire because
That's definitely not true.
well, you know, I guess I could do like Tomasi next. I could John Sebastian Vera is my friend.
That might be tough.
Yeah, or the Boats of Ballad. That it kind of be a little plotty.
My buddies did a recital of all Boatsa in undergrad, and they entitled the recital "Boatsa Load of Fun."
Oh, I like that. So they played. Was it just the tenor trombone pieces then?
I think it was a trumpet and a trombone joint recital.
Oh, okay.
So they did all the stuff. I did not attend, but I did appreciate the title. Hey, guess what? I played a gig with an orchestra.
I can't believe that.
I kind of can't believe it either. I play with the Wheeling Symphony in West Virginia when I can. For those that don't have a map in front of them, West Virginia is actually pretty close to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's on the western side of Pennsylvania, so a lot of people in the Pittsburgh Opera play in the Wheeling Symphony. It's kind of cool because it's in the contract that the two organizations aren't allowed to schedule over each other.
Oh, that's so great.
Which is definitely not a problem this year. But they've been very proactive, and so we did an outdoors concert that we normally have during Labor Day, but the audience wasn't invited, and they broadcast it on TV. They had a million protocols. Everyone was really responsible. You know, there was temperature check stations as we were walking in, and we had strict rules about our masks and being separated. It's definitely the most space I've ever felt on stage ever, which is very nice. Yeah. You can just put your trombone case right next to you and have plenty of space, which is nice. But, you know, it went fine actually. And there's some inherent things where, you know, if your section mate is 6 feet away from you and then the bass trombone's further 6 feet and kind of diagonal behind you, listening is not as ideal as you would imagine. But, you know, we could make it work. And there's some inherent endurance things for most people, as you would imagine, and just things like that. But it was really just, the way I described it was weird, but also familiar at the same time. So just really nice to blow. And it's just like athletes talk about, there's nothing like game shape. You can work out all off season, but there's nothing like the requirements to be in a game and how it feels to be actively performing and doing things. So it was nice to, you know, rev the engine a little bit, and hopefully it's an example for other orchestras.
That kitty's got a purr.
And if you enjoyed the podcast, please consider leaving us a rating and review on iTunes. And if you'd like to ask a question or list a topic you'd like us to discuss, also follow us at Trombone Retreat on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and our website, tromboneretreat.com. Also, feel free to shoot us an email at tromboneretreat@gmail.com, as we love hearing from you. You can also follow Nick at basstrombone444 on Instagram, and me at js.vera on Instagram, and Sebastian Vera on Twitter. Whew. Well done. We've been getting some wonderful reviews. First of all, thank you very much. It's always a pleasant surprise to open up and just see a new review, and it means the world to us. And so I wanted to start reading some of these because a lot of them are hilarious. The most recent one, and I'll just submit this without comment. First of all, I love on iTunes, for example, when you leave reviews, you have to put a title to the review.
Yeah, that's so good.
So like a headline. I don't know why, but I like it and people are really using it. So the headline, and this is from Joe Gunn Shoots Faux Fun. I have no idea who that is. Do you know who that is? Okay. So the title is Dulcet Tones Like Waves Crashing on the Stony Shore. And I apologize in advance for this. Let Sebastian's sweet, calm voice wash over you like the cool waters of Lake Michigan. He and Nick will quiet your mind and prepare you for an enjoyable and educational listening experience. The Third Coast team, I like team, that's good, has come up with an excellent platform to engage fellow artists and teachers, highlighting voices both familiar and fresh for your listening pleasure. A delightful addition to the brass band Sorry, I'm so used to saying brass band. A delightful addition to the brass podcast community. Their unique approach let the artists' stories lead the way, showcasing the wonderful facets of their careers and personalities. A must listen for all. Well, that was very nice. It started out kind of funny, and then it was heartwarming.
That was just like a warm cup of stew in the winter. Just or remember that series of books in the 90s, Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Oh yeah,
This was beef stew for the soul. This was a little heartier. Really got in there.
Can that be a new hashtag for the retreat podcast?
Done.
All right. Well, we have so much more in store, and we have a lot of cool interviews lined up coming up, and we have a lot of surprises, I think is a good way to say it, as far as this podcast is going to evolve, that are in the works, that we're really excited to share with you in the future. But we appreciate everyone for hanging out with us.
Thank you. And as always, retreat yourself.
Arthur Vera is my friend, is my friend, is my friend. I like him a whole lot. His name is Sebastian Vera. I like him a lot. His name's Sebastian. I like my friend Sebastian Vera, Sebastian Vera, Sebastian Vera. Sebastian.